The scream tore out of her throat before she even realized it, sharp and ragged, like a stray dog yelping after being kicked. It wasn't because of a hand grabbing her or a man standing over her bed. It was because of the message glowing on her cheap second-hand phone. Nice thighs. Show more next time. Nomvula sat up so fast the rusted frame of her bunk bed groaned beneath her. Sweat clung to her forehead, even though the Soweto night air was cold, seeping through the cracks of their corrugated iron shack. The message didn't have a name, just a number she didn't know. Another one followed, buzzing the tiny screen. I like the way you undress. Do it slower. Her stomach twisted. She clutched the blanket to her chest as if it could shield her from the eyes that seemed to be watching. Unseen. Somewhere out there in the dark sprawl of tin roofs and flickering paraffin lamps. At 16, Nomvula had learned the rhythm of this settlement. The sounds of men coughing outside the tavern. The whoop of a siren far away. The shuffle of her mother's slippers when she came home late from begging or bargaining. But this was different. This felt like someone had broken into her body without touching her. She glanced across the room. Her mother, Sibongile, lay curled under a thin blanket on the mattress by the wall, snoring softly. The single candle had burned out an hour ago, leaving only the faint glow of a neighbor's TV filtering through a crack in the wall. Nomvula's fingers shook as she typed back, "Who are you?" No reply. Only silence. Then the buzz of another message. Your mother doesn't know how beautiful you are. Her breath caught. She almost dropped the phone. How did they know where she lived? Did they watch her through the cracks in the tin walls? Did someone from the settlement, one of the men who always lingered by the spaza shop, follow her home? Nomvula shoved the phone under her pillow and curled into herself, heart pounding. She didn't sleep. Every rustle of wind against the shack, every muffled laugh from outside, felt like someone standing right outside, peering in. By morning, the messages had multiplied. 15 new numbers, 15 strangers calling her baby, telling her they wanted more. Some sent voice notes, heavy breathing, whispers of her name she never gave them, animal grunts that made her skin crawl. She deleted them, one by one, but they kept coming. Her mother stirred. Sibongile yawned and sat up, her face creased with lines far deeper than her 40 years. She rubbed her eyes and reached for her battered iTel phone on the wooden crate they used as a table. The screen flickered weakly to life. Nomvula noticed the way her mother's face softened as she saw the phone brighten, as if that tiny rectangle of light was more precious than food. Sibongile had changed since the phone came into her life. She had grown addicted to data the way others in the settlement were addicted to alcohol. Even when there was no bread, no mealy meal, no candle for light, Sibongile would beg, borrow, or trade for airtime. Nomvula had thought it was just Facebook gossip, just chatting with men who sent her blessings in the form of R50 airtime vouchers. That was nothing new in Soweto. Women traded dignity for survival every day. But now, looking at her mother's smile as she tapped her screen, Nomvula felt a crawling unease. She didn't speak of the messages. Not yet. She couldn't. Instead, she went about her day as if everything was normal. She fetched water in a yellow plastic bucket from the communal tap, weaving past shacks where children chased each other barefoot. She swept the dusty floor of their shack with a broken broom. She put on her faded school uniform, careful not to let the holes in her stockings show too clearly. But the messages didn't stop. They followed her to school, to the dusty classroom where the chalk squeaked against the blackboard, to the lunch break where she sat alone with a slice of dry bread. Each vibration in her pocket felt like a hand on her thigh. She dared not tell her teachers. They would laugh or worse, blame her. "You teenagers with your selfies," they would say. "Stop sending boys pictures." By evening, when she returned to their shack, Nomvula's chest felt heavy with silence. Her mother sat hunched over the phone again, her face lit by its glow, her fingers swiping quickly. She looked almost guilty when Nomvula entered, quickly minimizing something on the screen. That night, as Nomvula undressed behind the thin curtain they had strung across the shack for privacy, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her skin prickled. She turned quickly. scanning the shack, only her mother's silhouette, hunched, still tapping on the phone. But when Nomvula bent to fold her skirt, her eyes flickered to the shiny black lens of her mother's phone, angled slightly, almost carelessly, toward the gap in the curtain. Her heart stumbled. She told herself she was imagining it. She told herself her ex-boyfriend, the one she had broken up with months ago, was the one leaking old pictures. That made more sense. Boys were cruel like that. But why did the men say things about last night? About the way you undress? It wasn't old pictures. It was now. Nomvula pulled her blanket tighter around her and turned her back to the curtain, trying to swallow the rising scream inside her chest. She closed her eyes, but the buzzing of her phone under the pillow pulsed like a heartbeat. The sun in Soweto was cruel, a white fire beating down on tin rooftops until the whole settlement shimmered as if it were boiling. Children ran barefoot between shacks, their laughter cutting through the heavy heat, while the older women sat under scraps of shade, fanning themselves with cardboard. Life in the settlement carried on, loud and restless, as though no one could afford to stop moving. But inside her chest, Nomvula carried a silence that grew heavier each day. The messages had not stopped. If anything, they came faster now, buzzing every few minutes with words that made her skin crawl. Men she didn't know, speaking to her as if they owned her body, describing the way her shoulder curved, the shape of her breasts, the way she tied her school skirt. Words so specific they couldn't be imagined. She stopped replying. She tried blocking the numbers, but for each one blocked, 3 new ones appeared. It was endless. At school, she sat stiff and guarded, no longer changing with her friends in the bathroom, no longer laughing when they teased her about boys. Her classmates thought she was being proud, acting better than them. They didn't see the fear that curled in her stomach every time she caught someone staring at her. At home, things felt worse. Her mother's phone had become like another person in their shack, glowing at all hours, whispering in the dark. Sibongile no longer looked her in the eye when Nomvula undressed behind the curtain. Sometimes, late at night, Nomvula would wake to find her mother's face lit by the phone, her eyes sharp, her lips curling into little smiles as she swiped. Food was scarce, as always. Some nights they had nothing but tea without sugar, nothing to soften the bitter taste. But on those same nights, Nomvula noticed her mother had fresh airtime, even data. She would sit for hours on Facebook, scrolling and giggling, while Nomvula's stomach growled. It didn't make sense. Airtime cost money. Bread cost money. Where did it come from when Sibongile had no job? One afternoon after school, Nomvula returned to find a plastic bag of chicken feet and vetkoek on the table. Her mouth watered instantly. It had been days since she had tasted meat. "Where did this come from, Ma?" she asked, setting down her bag. "Blessings," her mother said with a grin, already chewing on a greasy piece. "God provides," Nomvula frowned. God hadn't provided in years. Only struggle had. That night, the messages grew bolder. Photos arrived, screenshots of her, taken from angles she didn't recognize. One showed her bending to pick up her school bag. Another, worse, showed her changing behind the curtain, her bra halfway off. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She stared at the image until her stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. Someone was watching her. Someone inside the shack. She forced herself to breathe. Maybe it was her ex-boyfriend after all. Maybe he had snuck into the settlement one night, hidden a small camera, or stolen old pictures she had once sent when she was foolish enough to trust him. Yes, that had to be it. But then came the last message that night. "Tell your mother thanks for sharing. You're worth every megabyte." Nomvula's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands went cold, her mouth dry. She read the words again, certain she had made a mistake. But there they were, glowing, undeniable. She turned her head slowly, across the dark shack. Her mother sat with her back against the wall, eyes fixed on the little ITEL phone, a smile twitching at the corner of her lips. The glow of her screen reflected in her eyes like tiny fires. Nomvula couldn't breathe. She closed her phone, shoved it under her pillow, and lay stiff, staring at the roof. But sleep was impossible. The words replayed in her head again and again. Tell your mother thanks. The next morning, she decided. She would know the truth. She waited until her mother left to fetch water, humming softly, the plastic bucket balanced on her hip. The moment the shack door creaked shut, Nomvula's heart began to pound. Her eyes darted to the ITEL phone, left charging on the crate with a frayed cable. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The screen lit, asking for a code. Her stomach dropped. She didn't know it. But then, like a curse or a gift, she tried the date she was born, 2007. The phone opened. Her breath caught in her throat. The gallery was full. Rows and rows of photos, all of them of her. Her hands shook violently as she scrolled. Pictures of her changing clothes. Pictures of her washing herself with a bucket. Pictures of her sleeping, mouth slightly open, blanket slipping down. Pictures taken without her ever knowing, and in the WhatsApp chats, her world collapsed completely. Dozens of men. Profile pictures of strangers. Some smiling in shirts and ties, others shirtless, their faces shadowed. Conversations where Sibongile sent photo after photo, and in return, strings of airtime codes. Screenshots of, thank you, mama, here's 1 GB. Voice notes of men laughing, praising her mother for raising such a beautiful girl. Nomvula's knees buckled. She sat on the floor, the phone heavy in her hands, her own mother, her protector, her only blood. The woman she trusted to guard her in this harsh world was the one selling her, piece by piece, to men she had never met. All for food, all for data. Nomvula's chest heaved. She wanted to scream, to smash the phone against the floor, to tear down the shack around her. But her voice was gone. Her throat burned with silence. Outside, she heard her mother's footsteps returning, the slosh of water in the bucket. Panic shot through her. She shoved the phone back onto the crate, exactly where it had been. She dove onto the bed and yanked the blanket over herself, forcing her breathing to slow. The door creaked open. Her mother entered, humming. She set the bucket down, wiped her forehead, and reached for the phone with her wet hands. Nomvula peeked through the blanket. She saw her mother unlock it, scroll, smile faintly, and sit down as though nothing was wrong. Nothing was wrong. Except everything. Nomvula pressed her face deeper into the pillow, her eyes wide and wet. The betrayal was too sharp to hold, too heavy to carry. She couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe her? In Soweto, survival was dirty. Secrets were currency, and a mother's sin was rarely questioned. But the truth burned inside her like fire. She would never look at her mother the same again. The days that followed felt like walking barefoot over shards of glass. Every sound cut Nomvula. Every glance from her mother stabbed deeper. Yet Sibongile carried on as though nothing had happened, humming softly while cooking pap, laughing at messages on her phone, sitting with neighbors to gossip about who was sick or who had gotten a job in the city. But to Nomvula, the world had changed. The walls of their shack no longer felt like protection. They were prison bars, trapping her with the very person who had betrayed her in a way she couldn't even speak aloud. The messages on her own phone continued, worse now. Men demanded more, describing her body with a hunger that made her skin itch. Some sent money, asking for videos. Others called her by pet names, saying things no stranger should ever say. She didn't reply. She couldn't. But silence only seemed to feed their obsession. Every buzz reminded her of her mother's fingers, swiping, sending, selling. At school, she could barely focus. The blackboard swam before her eyes, the words of the teacher fading into background noise. Her friends noticed her silence, her sudden habit of pulling her sweater tightly around her even in the heat. "Are you sick?" one of them asked. Nomvula shook her head. She couldn't tell them. How could she? If the truth left her lips, it would never stop burning. The shame was hers now, though she hadn't chosen it. That was the cruelest part. Her mother's sin lived in her skin. Meanwhile, Sibongile grew more restless, more desperate for data. When the network slowed, she would curse under her breath, pacing the shack. Sometimes she disappeared for hours, returning with new airtime codes. Nomvula would sit in the corner, her stomach tight with anger, watching her mother giggle into the phone as if speaking to an invisible lover. But late at night, when the messages on Nomvula's phone buzzed like mosquitoes, she would stare at her mother's sleeping form and wonder, how could hunger, how could poverty, twist a mother so deeply that she would sacrifice her child's safety for a handful of megabytes? The settlement itself offered no answers. It only mirrored her pain. Every day, Nomvula saw other children scavenging through bins, mothers begging outside spaza shops, young girls hanging onto older men's arms for a plate of food. Everyone was fighting for survival. But still, betrayal wasn't supposed to come from home. One evening, a new kind of message came. A man sent her a photo, himself sitting in a car, smiling, holding a packet of KFC. His message read, "Your mom said you might meet me. Don't be shy. I'll buy you anything you want." Nomvula's heart clenched. She nearly dropped the phone. Her mother wasn't just selling pictures anymore. She was arranging meetings. The air inside the shack grew heavy, suffocating. Nomvula couldn't breathe. She watched her mother, who sat chewing on sunflower seeds, scrolling through her own phone with a faint smile. How could she look so calm? How could she pretend she hadn't just auctioned her daughter's innocence to strangers? The next night it happened again. Another man. Another promise of food. Another lie wrapped in data bundles. Nomvula's silence cracked. It was late, the shack dark except for the glow of their phones. Her hands trembled as she held up her own screen, showing the message. "Ma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why are they saying this? Why are they sending me things like this?" Her mother froze. For the first time, Sibongile's smile slipped. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then to her daughter's face. Her lips parted, but no words came. Nomvula's chest heaved. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "It's you, isn't it? You're giving them my pictures. You're selling me." The words hung in the air like smoke after a firework, impossible to take back. Sibongile swallowed hard. She set her phone down slowly, as if it weighed 1,000 bricks. For a long moment, she just stared at her daughter, her face unreadable. Finally, she whispered, "You don't understand. We have nothing, Nomvula." "Nothing." Nomvula's voice cracked, louder now. "So you sell me? To strangers? For airtime? For chicken feet?" Sibongile winced, but her voice grew sharper, defensive. What was I supposed to do? Let you starve? Let us sit in the dark with no candles, no data, no food? The world doesn't care about poor people like us. The men, they pay. They send food. They keep us alive. Alive? Nomvula shouted, standing, fists clenched. "You call this alive? You've killed me already." Her scream filled the shack, spilling into the narrow alleys between shacks, where neighbors paused their gossip to glance at the thin walls. Frowning, Sibongile flinched but pressed on, tears rising in her own eyes. "I did it for us, for you. You think life is fair? You think anyone will come save us? This is the only way." Nomvula's hands shook so violently she pressed them to her sides. "No, Ma, you didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. For your phone. For your data. You betrayed me." The word betrayed hit harder than any slap. Sibongile's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hands, rocking slightly as if the truth had finally struck her in the chest. But for Nomvula, there was no undoing it. The damage was carved into her bones. She turned away, clutching her blanket, curling into herself on the bed. Her sobs were loud, raw, uncontrollable. Sibongile sat frozen, the phone still glowing on the crate beside her. For the first time, the glow looked ugly, like a curse. She reached for it but then stopped, her hand trembling. Her daughter's cries filled the night, louder than any buzzing notification. And outside, life in the settlement carried on. The distant beat of Kwaito music, the laughter of drunk men, the barking of stray dogs. No one knew what storm had erupted inside the little shack. No one knew a mother had sold her daughter for data. The silence in their shack became louder than any fight. After the confrontation, mother and daughter no longer spoke in the easy, careless ways they once did. They shared the same roof, the same bed of hunger, but they lived in two different worlds. Sibongile moved around the shack like a shadow, quiet, restless, avoiding her daughter's eyes. Nomvula, in turn, avoided her altogether, eating quickly, dressing behind her curtain with her body tense, sleeping with her phone clutched tightly in her hands. The betrayal had built a wall between them. A wall stronger than bricks, higher than tin. A wall of shame and silence. But the wall had cracks. Poverty still pressed its cold fingers against them both. Days without food stretched long. The spaza shop owner no longer gave Sibongile credit. The neighbors had their own struggles. They couldn't carry another mouth. And the men on Sibongile's phone, the ones who had once flooded her with airtime, grew impatient. The messages to Nomvula kept coming. But now they grew angrier, demanding, threatening. "Why don't you reply anymore? Your mother promised more." Nomvula read them with shaking hands, her fear thickening. The men were not just nameless numbers anymore. They were waiting, watching. She felt them in every shadow. Even walking to school became a nightmare. Every man who passed her seemed like one of them. Every whistle on the street sounded like a secret call. At night, Sibongile would sometimes cry softly into her blanket, her body trembling. Nomvula lay awake, listening. She wanted to scream at her mother, to demand why the tears came only now after the damage was done. But the words stayed trapped in her throat. One evening, when the hunger was sharpest, Sibongile broke the silence. Her voice was hoarse, shaky. "Nomvula," she whispered, staring at the dirt floor. "We need food. There is no sugar, no bread, nothing left." Nomvula sat stiff on her bed, hugging her knees. She didn't answer. Her mother continued, her voice trembling more. "One man, he offered money. Real money. Not just airtime. He said if you— Stop." The word cut through the room like a knife. Nomvula's voice was low but filled with fire. "Don't say it. Don't even say it." Sibongile's mouth opened and closed, but no more words came. She buried her face in her hands. That night, Nomvula made her decision. She couldn't stay. Not in that shack. Not with the eyes of men crawling over her skin. Not with her mother's betrayal poisoning every breath. She would rather face the dangers of the world outside than live one more day in a house with no walls. A house where her own body was a currency. So at dawn, when the sky was just turning pale and the roosters crowed between shacks, she packed what little she had, a school book, a sweater, her phone. She tied them in a plastic bag. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it would wake her mother. She stood over the mattress where Sibongile slept. For a moment, the old love rose in her chest, the memory of nights when her mother sang her lullabies, of mornings when she walked her to school, of the soft hand that once braided her hair. For a moment, she almost bent down to kiss her mother's forehead goodbye, but then she remembered the photos. The messages. The laughter. The lies. Her heart hardened. She turned away. The shack door creaked softly as she pushed it open. The morning air was cold, sharp, filled with the smell of coal fires and damp earth. She stepped out, her plastic bag crinkling in her hand. Behind her, her mother stirred in her sleep, but didn't wake. Nomvula walked fast through the alleys, her head down, her steps steady. She didn't know exactly where she was going. Maybe to a cousin in another part of Soweto. Maybe to a church where no one would ask too many questions. Anywhere but here. Every step felt like tearing herself free from chains. But it also hurt, because leaving meant admitting she had no mother anymore. By the time the sun rose, bright and merciless, Nomvula was gone from the settlement. Back in the shack, Sibongile woke to an emptiness heavier than hunger. The mattress beside her was cold. The curtain hung still. The crate was bare. For the first time, there was no sound of her daughter moving, no sight of her braiding her hair for school. She called out softly at first. Then louder, "Nomvula?" Silence. Her chest tightened. She searched the shack, then outside, calling again and again. But her daughter was gone, leaving only shadows behind. And in that moment, Sibongile realized the full weight of what she had done. She had not sold her daughter's photos for data. She had sold her trust, her love, her very soul. And no amount of airtime, no amount of food could ever buy it back. She sank to the dirt floor, clutching the phone to her chest. But for the first time, the glow of the screen gave her no comfort. It burned her eyes, mocking her, whispering of the daughter she had lost. In the alleys outside, life in Soweto carried on. Children laughed, women fetched water, men shouted at spaza shops. But inside that shack, a mother wept alone, the echo of betrayal louder than the world around her, and far away. A girl walked alone into an uncertain future, carrying scars no one could see, scars that would never leave her. Because betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it sleeps beside you, hums lullabies to you, and whispers love, even as it destroys you.